How do we feel about Travis Hunter going into his bye? That and more this week on the couch. John Daigle, my dear friend, so much to think about. Usually we're not thinking about teams on bye, 6 teams on bye this week. The bye week gauntlet is here. But a player going into his bye had an interesting performance in London. How do you feel about Travis Hunter right now?
Side note, the bye weeks actually hit just in time because I know everyone was worried about who to stream at quarterback. I was even doing early quarterback rankings knowing week 8 was coming up. And then all of a sudden, all these injuries happened. And now you can
Right.
find any kind of quarterback with ease
Sure.
this week, as there are 4 to 6
Mm-hmm.
backups that are slated to start. But to get back to your main point with Travis Hunter, he is the encapsulation of the patience required in fantasy football. I don't know if it's just because of the intensifying, whatever the word is.
Mm-hmm.
We were all up until 1 a.m. Eastern watching Braxton Berrios get screen targets inside the 10-yard line. So excuse me if I'm just extra tired today. But he is like the personification of the patience that's required now. Maybe it's due to social media, maybe the extra coverage in training camp that we've all lost a lot of that patience. But it's kind of what's happening with Travion Henderson too, is that you don't want to give up on these players where you know their ceilings. Like so many times already, and we're only, quote unquote, only through 7 weeks, we've had to really zoom out, step back, and understand who the player is as a whole, who they've been their entire career, in order to like hang on to that patience and not give up too quickly. And that goes for a player like Travis Hunter, who again, I know it's only been 7 games, but there are multiple times already through the first month and a half of the season where people wanted to drop him in fantasy. But you just had to zoom out, understand this is a guy who, from the time he was in high school to graduating and becoming the #1 recruit nationally in the entire country, to then making $3.5 million in NIL money, to being the Walter Payton Man of the Year, a Heisman candidate, the best wide receiver for the nation's award, best wide receiver in the country last year, the best quarterback in the country last year. You just have to understand who that guy is. And so we're through 4 games in the NFL. Everyone wants to drop him, and you have to step back and say, no, he's too good. Let him figure it out. It's okay. I feel like and now we're being rewarded with it, quite honestly. So how do I feel about Travis Hunter? I feel great because we're getting back-to-back season highs now in route participation. And yes, this past game in London against the Rams, Brian Thomas Jr. gets banged up. Tim Patrick was injured. Dami Brown also got injured. But we're still seeing him operate, getting more downfield targets, operating 2 wide receiver sets confidently as they continue to try to figure out how he's going to naturally flow into the NFL and play both sides of the ball. But right now, I think he's flourishing on offense. So I'm very happy having Travis Hunter on my bench. I didn't even start him this past game when he blew up and had all those fantasy points, but that's okay because that's the kind of guy I want to see blow up, and then I can have confidence starting moving forward. That's similar to, again, going back to Travion Henderson. What's happening is that, can you start Henderson right now? Absolutely not. But we're talking about Ramondre Stevenson, a player who's led his position in fumbles, not only last year, but also tied for this year. And, stepping back again, Travion Henderson averaged over 7 yards per touch in his final year at Ohio State in front of Quinshon Judkins. Like, we know who that player is. So I understand it's going along slowly. It's not good right now. You can't start him right now. But he's absolutely, like, if he's dropped anywhere, because he's going to be dropped some places, you also can't find a better stash in all of fantasy football. Like, he's the player you want on the end of your bench that if it were to happen from mid-November on, not only would you have to have, but you want to start every single week too. So it's just the perfect time of the year to, again, zoom out and think about these players because we're still trying to win. And as crazy as it seems, like even when you factor in the fantasy championship and the fantasy playoffs, we're not halfway through the season yet.
Right.
We have more than half of this thing to go. So let's all just take a breath. Let's go to bed at earlier times. We're now done with Monday night doubleheaders. So hopefully it gets much easier from here on out.
Yeah, it does, right? And I think Travis Hunter, you described well the value of patience. Well, see, the thing is, everything is a double-edged sword because there's also a cost to patience when it's misplaced.
Absolutely.
But let's just finish up with Travis Hunter. Buy high, buy high, buy high. While he's on his buy, you actually might have a crack in the door because you see where this is headed, John, right? Brian Thomas Jr., like you said, banged up, but it's just not clicking. I don't know if it's Liam Cohen, Trevor Lawrence, or both. I'm not saying it can't change. We're always making predictions about an uncertain future, but I've seen enough. And I felt the ripple I felt in the force. Liam Cohen was talking about Travis Hunter doing well with his opportunities. They didn't, he's, and the bye week is consequential in fantasy football. Look at how different the Bears are. Look at the Bears going into the bye and the Bears coming out of the bye. And that's huge. I mean, the value of Roma Dunze, the value of Kyle Monangai, the value of Caleb Williams, massively affected by bye week adjustments, right? Massively. What will Liam Cohen do in his first bye week? Sure seems to me like Travis Hunter is going to be a bigger part of the offense. And the ripple that went through my head, John, was I wonder if anyone's going to call James Gladstone about Brian Thomas Jr. I wonder. Because everybody's watching everybody. I mean, every team has like people that work for them that are like watching all the other players, right? And everybody can see that it's not working. It's not clicking. Not that it can't change, but you wonder. Now, you mentioned Henderson, and this is where, in a rare moment, like I might go counter to you on this and say, and look, with Henderson, I think it's confidence. Somebody said, and I think this is a good theory, that he looks like he's trying to just play not to make mistakes right now. And this could be like Mike Vrabel, maybe the tough love, Mike Vrabel, whatever, which is funny, not tough love for Ramondre Stevenson with his fumbles, but Travion Henderson, like you said, that burst, the acceleration, the dangerous player, they were so excited. What is a little troubling about this, John, is this isn't one of the situations where like, the Patriots are going to bring their rookies along slowly. All of the buzz was they're so excited about him. He looked like a player to be excited about, and we're just not seeing that player. The other thing that's troubling to me about Henderson is just that the offense is better with Stevenson. It's just better. I mean, Stevenson fits the ascent of Drake May. His pass blocking, he puts them in a power running mode, which just everything works better for them out of that mode. And he is a hoss. I mean, he's going to fumble, but he's good in the passing game. We saw him even outside of structure. I'll tell you when the ripple went through the force for me on this, John. It was whenever Stevenson had that excellent play, like a 35-yard pass downfield from May on an extended play. It's like week 2 or week 3. I don't remember which week it was. And they said they practiced the play with Henderson, but Stevenson was the one that actually made it in the game. And I thought, like what's going on here? I don't think it's impossible. And the thing that makes me reluctant to say sell low on Henderson or like see if somebody who's still holding on to like your position is that the Patriots offense is so good that if his confidence clicks in, if a bye week adjustment, like if some things happen, you're right, the payoff's going to be huge. But then I'll toss this one to you because I think that it clearly at this point that someone like RJ Harvey, who was not as highly heralded as Henderson, but still for fantasy was roughly in the same range as, I think it's clearly time. I'm not saying to drop Harvey because, if Dobbins goes down, but the dream is over for Harvey having fantasy value without a Dobbins injury this year. Agree or disagree?
I agree. Again, not that I'm going to drop Harvey, but I have significantly less confidence that Harvey will get there than Henderson. And I would definitely stash Henderson over Harvey if that's applicable to anyone. I also just think there are more hoops to jump for Harvey. Worse quarterback play, worse offense, honestly. Whereas Drake May, as you mentioned, the ascension as a top 5 quarterback, as a developing player, we saw this happen with CJ Stroud. I remember being on a podcast earlier this offseason, and we were talking about Jaden Daniels. And I had mentioned about just potential regression and where we were in CJ Stroud's portion of his career, where remember everyone was trying to shuffle up in last year in the second half and say Bryce Young is going to develop better than CJ Stroud. Like these things come quickly. They start happening overnight. And so the fact we're already at the portion of their careers, only a year and a half in, where now if you reshuffled, everyone would probably take Drake May over Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams in the mix somewhere. At least it's comforting to see Drake May like develop immensely in year 2. But it's also just it being the better offense, you still want pieces there, especially because there's nothing set in stone. Like Hunter Henry, sure. And from time to time, I still think Drake May mixes up Austin Hooper with Hunter Henry because you can't tell the difference when they're running routes. That's why anytime Hooper has 3 catches, May actually thought it was Hunter Henry. But beyond that, like Stephon Diggs everyone's only really been happy with 2 games all year in him for fantasy. The encouraging sign is that we are getting the route participation. Like this past week, even a 30% target share. He was there. I know he didn't go over 100 yards. He didn't have an immense game, but he got the targets. You would assume the touchdowns follow shortly. So at least we're getting there. Kayshon Boutte, the role has not changed. So that first month of the year, when I was hanging on to him everywhere, the role's the same. He just all of a sudden started scoring touchdowns a month later after I dropped him. We're just looking for that piece that's absolute that can be with Drake May Weekly, and we genuinely don't have that outside of, oddly enough, as you said, Ramondre Stevenson right now. So I do think there are more pieces to come. There's a lot more room to grow and directions to grow within that offense, and I think Travion Henderson's that guy. But yes, Harvey seems like one that's definitely lost. Also, just to quickly rewind, it's also not a coincidence when we talk about Liam Cohen in the bye week, Ben Johnson in the bye week. It is not a coincidence at all that right now the 2 most penalized offenses in the league are the Jaguars and the Bears. It takes time to learn and develop into these complicated but fluid offenses. And honestly, everything we've seen from Liam Cohen, I don't blame him whatsoever. I blame the offensive line for not understanding hard counts. I blame the players for failing in the system so far. I blame Trevor Lawrence for a lot of the issues that was like similar to the Daniel Jones situation where the organization was in purgatory and didn't want to, but had no choice but to extend Trevor Lawrence. I think right now, everything we got from Liam Cohen in terms of pre-snap motion, play action rate, getting the best out of his players, I actually think he's done a tremendous job. He's exceeded my expectations so far. So I would hope, unlike the Texans, that the Jaguars use the bye week to actually learn their strengths and just get better in some aspects. That way they come out with alterations. Again, unlike the Texans, who, as you can tell, I'm still upset about right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what's fascinating watching it play out the way you described, John, is that I had one of those, we have these like off the record conversations with beat writers. It's like, tell me what's really happening. Because beat writers can't tell what's really happening in their coverage, like there's a lot of restrictions. So you can like,
yes,
he's like, hey, off the record, what's really happening? And the Jags person I was talking to said, ooh, you can tell that Liam Cohen's system is a lot for the offensive line. He's like, the offensive line, or she is like, the offensive line is, it's a lot for them, what they're learning. It's going to be a while, they look confused sometimes. And you don't even think about that often. Like, wow, the offensive line looks confused. Well, that just tells you like what Liam Cohen was asking of them was probably a lot more than they were being asked of them before. I want to go back to Henderson really quick because this is doing the waiver wire stuff for football guys. This was a question that I had to answer mentally because sometimes you give drop advice too.
yes.
And you rank players and you say like, well, do I drop this player? Well, it depends who's out there. Would you rather have Travion Henderson or Brashard Smith right now?
Travion Henderson.
Ooh, you did have to think about it. It wasn't like instant. So
I'm still thrown off by upset, not thrown off, maybe the word for it, that a couple weeks ago they talked up his usage and then he came out and played 6 snaps.
Right.
I'm still pissed
2 weeks
off
in a
about
row.
that. Not to mention that I believe he only had, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was 3 carries going into the fourth quarter and then got all of his touches in that blowout game where the Chiefs had more first down than the Raiders ran plays. And so I also want to like throw out a lot of that usage. I want, as much as anyone, Brashard Smith to happen, since right now Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco are the equivalent of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, which is the hellscape of fantasy. It's not fun to talk about, write about, watch, start them. It's not fun at all to have any of those players. And so you need that third option to break out. And Brashard Smith, in my opinion, is their most explosive player. But what we all can agree with, I hope we can all agree with, is that Kareem Hunt is actually a very efficient goal line back. And so that's why I'm very concerned about, even if Pacheco gets healthier and the usage continues, what is the actual upside there? And it's the same thing for Brashard Smith. You have more outs because, as they're showing, they want to feature him more in the passing game, similar to Jerick McKinnon.
Right.
We can get a role like that that's serviceable, especially as bye weeks continue to appear. But beyond that, what is the actual ceiling when Hunt is clearly the guy they love using inside the 5-yard line? I will happily take Henderson.
Yeah, well, and here's why in the end I decided Brashard Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike Henderson, when I watch Brashard Smith, he looks quick. He looks fast. he like the qualities we saw at SMU are translating to the field. And again, with Henderson, it's not like he's not fast and he's not quick or he doesn't have. It's just I think the mental side, the confidence side for him isn't clicking. And eventually, it seems like eventually, like maybe it's just a certain number of reps, a certain number of weeks, a certain number of answering questions correctly in practice or something. Eventually, I think they will have to say like, because we thought it was happening, and that's what was so frustrating. I mean, even this is vacillating Sigmund Bloom. I'm like, stash Brashard Smith, stash Brashard Smith, stash Brashard Smith. 6 snaps. Well, maybe not. And rumors about trading for a running back, which I think it was Diana Rossini, but I might be wrong, saying, well, Kansas City might not be in the market for running back, although Hunt got a little banged up last week. On that note, trade deadline angles. I mean, I know that probably the best angle is just to say nothing really that consequential is going to happen, so there's nothing really to get out ahead of. But that's okay if that's your answer. But is there something that you're watching, interested in?
Alvin Kamara and Breece Hall were the only two grenades I was looking at to ruin a backfield here. But Kamara has already said that he's not going anywhere. And if he does go somewhere, he'll just retire. So I imagine they're not going to trade him. And then Breece Hall is the one, especially with the Jets going nowhere in a hurry, that definitely could get shipped. My point is always, though, that this is not the NBA. Nothing fun like that ever happens at the trade deadline in the NFL. I think you have to go all the way back to Roy Williams getting traded to the Cowboys. Like last year, I know it seemed fun that DeAndre Hopkins and Amari Cooper got dealt, but ask anyone who had DeAndre Hopkins and Amari Cooper how fun that was in the second half of the season. Spoiler alert, it was not. So I just don't ever think impactful things like that are going to happen in the NFL, unfortunately, mid-season.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, Breece Hall is interesting just because there's actually been foreshadowing of a Breece Hall trade all the way back to the draft, right?
Yeah.
And you have a new GM, and he's an expiring asset. And if you have clarity that you're not going to re-sign him, now, can a running back get a fourth round comp pick salary in free agency now? I don't know. I mean, not unless it's Saquon Barkley, So if you can get a fourth this coming year for him, I mean, do you go ahead and do it? I think that for a team building strategy, it makes sense. Kamara, yeah, like you said, like he's an all-time saint. I mean, I really think you see more Kamara jerseys in New Orleans now than Breeze jerseys at this point. Olave, I think it was Jeff Nowak that said like he's still part of their long-term plans.
Yeah.
He was a name that was mentioned. What about Miami? What about is Chris Greer gone? Like you don't even Jalen Waddle. I know when when Tony Pauline said the Seattle would trade Reculin for Devin Achane if Devin Achane's available, and I think people did the math like that's his agent maybe trying to get him out of Miami, but that's still smoke. I mean, if the agent is putting something out there like, hey, come and try to trade for my player, that's actual smoke. And I know that Waddle his name has been bandied about. What do you think about Miami as a trade deadline player?
It's such a disastrous situation in Miami because their front seven was the strength of their offseason. They were supposed to come in and say to themselves, well, we can't get coverage. We may struggle on offense at times, but at least we have a good pass rush, and they don't even have that. That's why they're blitzing at a top 5 rate in the league. And even then, their pass rushers are struggling to get to the quarterback whenever they send extras. So it's a real mess. And if you think it's not enjoyable to watch Tua with Mike McDaniel, just wait till Mike McDaniel's fired. It's not going to be pretty at all. We also know this is the Greg Rosenthal theorem that anytime the coach is to come out and say this player is a starter, that means the following week they're not the starter. And so it seems like we're already on our way to seeing Quinn Ewers start in the next couple of games. Yeah. I mentioned him in the waiver column as a Superflex pickup because obviously everyone's desperate in Superflex leagues. It's a stash to get ahead of just in case. But now no Darren Waller, which we were all cheering for Darren Waller, but we kind of expected at 34 years old, missed the first 3 games with the injury as well. It was when, not if for him. And so now to have an injured pectoral seems like he's going to be out multiple games. It really just seems like we're headed toward Mike McDaniel being the guy that, like a lot of individuals, Steve Spagnuolo comes to mind first, but like a lot of coaches who is destined to be a genius coordinator, but when asked to take on too much as a head coach, is just in over their head. And so right now, I look forward to the Mike McDaniel stint as an offensive coordinator next year, but seems to very much be on his way out and pretty much dragging Tua along with him. So for the Dolphins, it's an absolute mess. Yes, to your point, probably trying to get Achane out of there. I just can't imagine a world where Achane and Waller are traded. And maybe not even Chris Greer fired, honestly, because if he hasn't been fired to this point, what would make him fired this offseason too? It's a really bad and frustrating organization. Ask Dolphins fans.
Yeah, ownership matters, right? And to your point, I think that Mike McDaniel, we saw here's the trajectory we saw with Mike McDaniel. What happens when a legit football whiz, I mean a legit football visionary ends up in a toxic organization, right? I mean, he wasn't even the owner's real choice. The real choice was Sean Payton. Tua Tagovailoa wasn't the owner's real choice. The real choice was Tom Brady, right? So you already know you're the stepchild, right? And the first year, there's like Chip Kelly with Michael Vick in Philly, right? The first year, like they got the drop on the league. And you saw what the Wiz could come up with the personnel they had, you know? But then when it came time to counterpunch and it came time, because the league is always going to catch up. The league's always going to catch up. There was no counterpunch, in part because what do we see from these teams like the Bills, like the Lions? I think the Bears are trying to do it. You need to have a physical, you need to have a right hand, like a body blow in the run game, or just a sense of physicality about the game and a sense of seriousness about it, you know? And Mike McDaniel, as I said, John, even though Mike McDaniel wanted to play football at Yale, I think they were like, you're a little too light. And he's a football player, but he's like, it's the closest thing to if one of us became a head coach, right? Where it's more like theory and he's just like your friend, you know? And with the culture of that organization, it just sucked everybody down to like quicksand, you know? It just, and now here we are, and I have no idea where it's going to go from here. And that's why an agent would be trying to get a player out of there. And I think for fantasy, what it means is, I mean, Devin Achane has already been transcending for so long. But how can you transcend with Quinn Ewers at quarterback and a team that might just be giving up? The ripple for me here, John, was when they didn't bring back Calais Campbell, who I believe wanted to come back and ended up with Arizona instead. Go ahead. Were you going to say something? Yeah.
I was going to say, and for fantasy, I don't think it's a situation where I'm selling Waddle high or getting off of him, just because without Waller, there are only two viable targets to get the ball, and that is Waddle and Achane. So even with Ewers potentially starting the next few games, I don't want to get off them, but the ceiling is certainly coming down a lot more than what we saw those first few starts without Tyreek Hill. But also to that point, and getting back to coming full circle about Henderson, since it always depends on your league, your roster size. This is why I always clamor for everyone to have more flexes and shorter benches. I've said that on this show before. It's the best way to play fantasy football. Even though it's tougher, you force everyone to make decisions so they can't stash Henderson, Brashard Smith. They have to drop those kind of guys as opposed to holding on to them. Some rosters may have even been forced to like drop CeeDee Lamb or lose games by holding on to them when you have shorter benches, 4 spots maximum. Having said that, in normal leagues where you have deeper benches, like the whole goal is to only beat 9 other people, 11 other people, 13 other people. And so to me, it's still easy to trade pennies for ceiling. And that's what I did with Amari Hampton. That's what I yelled about with Travis Hunter a few weeks ago. I still think Henderson is in that range where it takes, not even kidding, like here's $15 a fab to the manager. Like, take this 15. Sure. You want Monangai. I know you do instead. You don't want Henderson. I will happily take on Henderson at the back of my bench and wait this thing out, even if it turns into an L. I think those are the kind of deals I'm always trying to make in season-long football.
Yeah, I think it's fun, and it's you feel such a sense of vindication, but also you bring up Hampton, and you're right to bring up Hampton with respect to Henderson, because Hampton also in the first 2 games did not look like a guy that deserved a starting job, did not look like a guy that was going to be impactful for fantasy football. And even before Najee Harris got hurt in that game, Harris was outplaying him. We were on our way to Harris being the Ramondre Stevenson of that team. We were on our way to that. And then Harris got hurt, and all of a sudden Omarion Hampton found himself. And so for Travion Henderson, that could be also in the cards. We didn't see it when Stevenson and Gibson got pulled from their fumbles, but it's a long season. Just winding up trade deadline talk, I guess the only other player would be Jacoby Myers, another player where there was like foreshadowing, certainly not taking off with Geno Smith. Is there anything there? Like, what would it interest you if he ended up, say, with the Steelers or the Giants, or alternatively, or would you be now like saying, "Ooh, Jack Besh," or maybe get in on Brock Bowers, and anything to Jacoby Myers and his prospects?
I think simply we're going to get Myers and Bowers back at full strength. And then we're asking ourselves, is their pass rate over expectation in the last 3 games? Was that simply because they didn't have Bowers and Myers was banged up? Do they want to get back to being that team like in week 1 against the Patriots, where all they did was launch it downfield? So much so that Geno Smith had a career high in completions 10 yards downfield. Maybe, and that would make sense given what their offense is. I know they can't pass protect right now, especially without Colton Miller, but they're very clearly struggling to run the ball despite getting Ashton Genty more involved in the passing game. So I think that is their only way out, and that's the hope, is to take these players, their strength, at full strength, and just try to outscore teams similar to what the Cowboys are doing. So yeah, the last couple of weeks, we've done the rest of season 150 show on Established to Run podcast feed, free for everyone. And that's always been a sentiment in mind, is that now you have an opportunity to buy Brock Bowers low. And that even includes if you have a top heavy roster, like trading Jake Ferguson and trading Jake Ferguson and a stash running back for Brock Bowers. And everyone scoffed at that. But also, Jake Ferguson is not only the tight end 1 in fantasy points per game, but he's been a top 5 tight end now in 4 consecutive weeks. Like, he is a guy you kind of have to have. He's shaping up to be one of the best steals in all of fantasy football. And so it made sense a couple weeks ago to try to get onto Brock Bowers. I still think it makes sense, assuming they're going to be at full strength with Brock Bowers now. It'll be a full month since he's played football. So I would hope that's enough for his knee injury to recover.
Yeah, I've had Jake Ferguson as a sell high for like 2 or 3 weeks.
For the right reason.
I know.
He's just getting peppered underneath, but now the touchdowns are following, and so that's not good. Yeah,
I know. He didn't have a touchdown last year.
Also, like Dak Prescott, they got to make the playoffs. But right now, Dak Prescott is playing like a top 3 MVP candidate.
Oh my gosh, it's breathtaking. It's so much fun. I mean, let's just take a moment out. Let's get positive here. Like I was telling John before the show, if you ran into little Siggy, once I learned my blood type, I was cheeky. I talked to everybody too, believe it or not. And I'd say my life philosophy is my blood type. Be positive. Let's be positive and just take a moment of appreciation out that we're watching some quarterbacks play as well as we've seen them play in their careers, like at a level, and it's a beauty. Gorgeous, like just admiring beauty, like Matthew Stafford's play the last few weeks, Dak Prescott's play this year, Baker Mayfield until last night, and we mentioned Drake May. I saw someone comment a couple weeks ago during a Patriots game, John, this is the first time I watched the Patriots. Is this how Drake May plays every week? It's wonderful, and in fantasy football, it's actionable. In fantasy football, like now that we see these quarterbacks are in tune, like Cecil talks about windows, we're in those windows where these offenses are getting maximized. Daniel freaking Jones. And let Daniel Jones stand for the principle that there's nothing we should just dismiss or scoff at in the offseason. There's nothing that's so unlikely that I know that can't happen, right? 0% of people had Daniel Jones doing this. 0%. So the sooner, I talk about this all the time in the preseason, John, the sooner that you are willing to accept something and say, I don't need more evidence, even though this is going counter to my priors, that is maybe the most important quality in a fantasy football player.
And those guys we're talking about, Daniel Jones, Dak Prescott, Drake May, those are all in the top 7 quarterbacks. They're the 3 behind, of course, the big 4, that no one thought was budging in whatever order anyhow, except Patrick Mahomes is currently the QB1 in fantasy because he's tacking on a career high in rushing points per game on top of reading defense at another level. And finally, for the first time in his career, having Xavier Worthy overlap with Rashee Rice, overlap with Hollywood Brown. It just seems like, I know it was the Raiders, it was one game, and Patrick Mahomes always owned Patrick Graham, the Raiders defensive coordinator, so it always just shaped up to be one that they were going to perform well at. But it does seem like the arrow is somehow pointing up even further for the Chiefs offense rest of season 2.
Yeah, which brings us back to Brashard Smith. Not really, but yeah. I mean, all these things all intersect, right? That's the beautiful thing about spending time together on the couch with wonderful, bright people like you, John, is you see how we can't talk about one thing without talking about everything. We aren't going to talk about everything, but we still have a lot to talk about. Here's something I want to talk about. John, I look at it and I look at it and I look at it, and even if I don't want to see it, Joe Flacco looks like a fantasy quarterback one the rest of the season.
So what's happened that I did not expect, and maybe this is because I doubt it, but just attributing that we did get some tight end injuries. So Mike Gesicki, Tanner Hudson out. That leaves basically only Noah Fant, who we saw catch a touchdown, only 8.5% target share this past game. What I did not expect from Joe Flacco, maybe I should have, so it's my mistake, is that the way we get Jamar Chase and T. Higgins there, even if the targets are inefficient, is by condensing the target tree and only giving them the ball. And that's what's happened with Joe Flacco. Even this past game against the Steelers, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase accounted for 70% of the team's targets. That's how you get there every single week. And so as long as that doesn't change, where it is literally a two-man show with Joe Flacco, they will be, I had even mentioned selling Jamar Chase high, expecting them still to have a flatter target tree. And if that's not the case, I'm absolutely going to be dead wrong, because they can both continue to get there as wide receiver ones with this type of volume that's currently happening. So yes, Joe Flacco just showing that even if there's garbage time, he can keep them both alive and sustain the volume himself. It came at the perfect time where there are so many quarterback injuries and 6 teams on bye. Joe Flacco is available in 90% of Yahoo leagues last I looked. Like, he's someone who absolutely should be picked up and started this week.
Yeah. Now, interestingly enough, against the Jets, whose defense has come alive. They are the defense. Cecil put it right. I asked him after the Broncos-Jets game, I said, was this just that Bo Nix and Sean Payton, like, it's not working, it's not clicking yet, or the Jets defense actually play well? He's like, no, the Jets defense is playing for Aaron Glenn. So we'll see what he does against Joe Flacco, because ironically, it was the Steelers defense that made us think, oh my, this Jets offense with Justin Fields, who's making plays out of structure as a passer, and look at Breece Hall, and wow, this is going to work right away. What a combination. No, it was just the Steelers defense was atrocious.
Yeah, it's been bad.
And it was bad. It was getting better, though. I mean, they held Minnesota and Carson Wentz down for most of the game. It was getting better. And I don't know what happened. But again, the ripple in the force, two ripples in the force with Flacco. One was, I saw when he joined the Bengals, somebody asked him, like, why are you still playing? And he said something to the effect of, like, I know I'm not going to play forever. When I'm 50, I want to look back and say that I gave everything I had. And basically he was saying, like, I love playing football. I love being a quarterback. I love being part of a team. He didn't say it in these words. And I'm going to do that as long as I can, And for me, that caught my attention, John, because that told me he's playing for love of the game. He's playing for spiritual reasons at this point. And that can open things up. And then Mike Tomlin was annoyed. Mike Tomlin thought it was worth mentioning, and coaches know that everything they say, like, that he didn't understand why Cleveland would trade Joe Flacco to Cincinnati if they thought Flacco was good enough to start week 1 for them. He was annoyed.
He was also upset because Joe Flacco's had his number for his entire career. So
yes.
Now he has to play him more often. Yeah.
Right. So we may look back and say, oh, he was a game competitor against Green Bay, whose defense isn't as good as we thought. Look what Jacoby Brissett did against them last week. And then the Steelers' atrocious defense made it look like Flacco's back, 23 targets to Chase and so on. But So this is a good test. This is a good test because we're kind of at that beginning of season mode with Cincinnati, where we're trying to figure out where the real mean is with this offense. But Joe Flacco has got some momentum, and go ahead.
And the way it usually works, not to pour cold water on the Flacco moment, because I do believe we're going to get a few more weeks of fantasy goodness from the entire offense. But the way it's historically worked for backup quarterbacks is they do have, especially the good ones, they have about a 2 to 4 week window until the rest of the NFL gets tape on them. And then when they get tape on them, you realize they're backup quarterbacks because they cannot adjust. I think we're seeing that. Well, we'll go back to Joe Flacco, the most recent example with the Browns, when he even brought home fantasy championships in week 17 against the Jets that one time, who were also a very good defense at the time. And then he gets to the playoffs, they play the Texans, and the Texans defense just destroys him because he reminds us he's Joe Flacco. I think that's what's happening right now, or going to happen with Jacoby Brissett, who is actually functioning the Cardinals offense better than Kyler Murray has all year. I just wonder how long the leash is for Jacoby Brissett until defenses figure him out. Same thing for Joe Flacco. But right now, yes, they are performing better than the quarterbacks prior to them.
And the one thing that makes me think maybe this can persist, John, is that what this offense calls for is exactly what Joe Flacco is comfortable doing. Like just throw like it's an arena football game, you know, and let your talented receivers do the rest. 23 targets for Jamar Chase. 23 targets for Jamar Chase. Anyway, I was also Jamar Chase. I said sell high. I mean, I saw the Jake Browning disaster coming. I said get out of all your Bengals positions, and that's fantasy football for you, right? When you said get out of all your Bengals positions, you were right. But now, boy, you wish you didn't. Even Chase Brown. Okay, a couple more things. Well, you know what? I want to talk about this big picture thing that we were starting to talk about before the show. This is fun, right? And this is fun because talking to my friends, to my dear friends on the show, like we're all in this fantasy football industry. It's so funny. I have such a complex. This is where I'm on the couch because my people ask me my job. I use air quotes or I make a face. Oftentimes, someone will say, "What do you do for a living?" It's the United States. A lot of people say that, and I'll make a face before I say anything, and they'll say like, "Oh, this is going to be good," you know. But it comes with some fascinating, interesting things that I guess only we kind of understand each other. Let's understand each other and maybe share a side of this, because fantasy football analyst is a job, and we ask for it. We sought this out, so I'm not complaining. I'm happy. There's a lot of you listening and watching that are doing like really hard actual jobs that society needs to keep going. Thank you. And thank you for contributing to letting us do this and just sit around, because that's what we do on the couch. Fantasy football, being a fantasy football analyst, John, will make you say, really, what have I done with my life?
I completely agree. I have no idea what direction you want me to go with that.
Anywhere you want to go. We're on the couch.
Oh, man. I mean, we just talked about, because I always consider it my job to make decisions for people. Like, I don't want to just give you the analysis. I understand you listen to me. You may even pay for content I do because you want my help. Maybe you enjoy it, but also you want my help. And so I try to make the decisions for you. Having done that, it's impossible to be right all the time. And unfortunately, I do think a lot of people remember like your biggest, in both directions, your biggest hits and misses. And so, like, I was thinking about this morning, actually. I was trying to remember, because I had a lot of correct things, as you know, that's our job, is to be right a majority of the time, but a majority is 50.1%. So the other 49.9%, it hurts whenever you're wrong. And the biggest miss I had was taking Amari and Hampton over Jonathan Taylor, where even if Amari and Hampton was healthy, he was not outscoring the king himself, Jonathan Taylor, so far. And so that's one I was thinking about. The correct ones, though, that I've also been coming back to, and this will probably lead us into more conversation, is one, I did dip out. I was adamant I was dipping out after Breece Hall in terms of the range and the tiers of running backs, James Cook and Breece Hall, and then I was going away until Jaylen Warren and Jordan Mason. So basically going away for 4 or 5 rounds, ignoring Kenneth Walker, ignoring Chuba Hubbard, ignoring Aaron Jones, that whole range of players, because I preferred the wide receivers there, which included George Pickens, JSN, Ted McMillan, guys who not only had contingency value, but also top 12 ceilings with target shares and were not being treated as such. And that includes like guys who were also missing, like DK Metcalf's not a miss, but he's not ultimately getting there without touchdowns. Calvin Ridley definitely is not getting there. And I was big on him in the 5th round.
Devontae Smith.
We got there for one game, yeah. But yeah, so I think that was the correct way to draft. And even like my greatest quote, I think I may have even said it on this show this offseason. We'd have to go dig it up. My greatest quote was, I want to ignore Brock Bowers because he's fighting a margin of outscoring Trey McBride and George Kittle. So Trey McBride was right. But then I also said after that, every tight end is the same. So what everyone should be doing is waiting until they can draft Jake Ferguson, Tucker Kraft, and Dallas Goedert. That's a quote. And that so far
home run.
is nails, yes. But going back to what I got wrong, where I've been assessing is the Saquon Barkley predicament. Because we've even had this conversation this offseason in my not my pros versus Joe's. No, it was my pros versus Joe's draft, where I took Bijan Robinson over Saquon Barkley. And then I also had Christian McCaffrey ranked over Saquon Barkley. But that was only because we were trying to nitpick what I felt like, and this includes when you get to the back of the first round, and Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who everyone, including myself, was a little bit lower on, they were all there as well. In my opinion, I called it the tightest first round in fantasy football history.
Yeah.
And so we were allowed to nitpick to try to get things right. And I don't even know if I backdoored, if I was wrong about the Saquon Barkley assessment, but the entire point was that since 2019, that running backs who had handled 400 plus touches did come back and average 1.4 fewer points per game and 1.5 yards fewer yards per touch. They were just less efficient was the entire point of the conversation. I don't even know if that's Saquon Barkley this year, because the offensive line is also can be attributed to the issues they're going through. But even when you look at, because right now everyone's assessing about the loaded box, the 8-man boxes that Barkley's facing. And that's why he's having a tough time running the ball. But even against light boxes, five individuals or fewer in the front 7, he's averaging just 3 yards per carry. It's been woeful regardless. And again, I think that's because of the offensive line. But where do you go with Saquon Barkley from here, I think is a tremendous question, because I'm not even sure he's a buy low guy as we continue to try to figure out, as Kevin Patula continues to try to figure out his own offense. Like I have been starting A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert consistently, not even having that faith they figure it out, but just because they're too damn talented to not figure it out.
Right.
And that benefited me in not benching Devonta Smith this week as he blows up against the Vikings. But also you look back and you say, yeah, but it was 23 pass attempts for 14 yards per attempt. Clearly, that's not going to happen every week, too. So I'm not sure we learned anything yet about the Eagles' offense, except that all these guys are too talented to just not figure it out eventually.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The good news, I think, from last week is the first A.J. Brown touchdown came on 4th down, 4th and 3, vertical shot. And they kept going vertical, even though, when that pick 6 happened, when Jalix Hunt dropped into coverage and picked Carson Wentz pick 6 alert. I thought, oh, great. Now the offense is going to go into a shell. And they didn't. And they needed to not go into a shell or they would have lost the game. So I hope that they've turned a corner, like you said, Kevin Patullo, because I think part of the problem was his play calling was just so vanilla that Landon Dickerson eventually said something about it. When an offensive lineman is talking about it, or is it Lane Johnson? I'm sorry, Lane Johnson was talking about it. When Lane Johnson is talking about your play calling, then something's wrong. But they were still winning, and then they started to lose. And I think that's whenever there was some urgency, and they're just too good. And I think there's a way to apply what you just said to Buffalo, to the way Buffalo's offense has looked the last couple of weeks. And they're a good enough organization, and there's good enough, not as good receivers as Philly, but they're going to figure something better out. I want to go back to the what have we done with our life thing, though, because I like that you immediately went to hits and misses and how we're rated by that, right? And there's a certain thing, but to my fellow creators out there, I'm looking in the camera when I say this, John, to my fellow creators out there, your job is essentially sitting in the dunk tank. We're all sitting in the dunk tank.
That's a good way to put it. I've never thought of that. Yeah.
We're just sitting in the dunk tank. do it with some grace. And like we talked about before the show, you signed up for this.
Yeah.
You're the one that said, look at me. I know something about football. Listen to me. So when you're wrong, people are going to throw tomatoes. And actually, that's one of the services that we're performing, is giving them someone to throw tomatoes at. They can't like throw tomatoes themselves. So, you know, like I always say, I'm either going to help you win or give you someone to blame when you lose, you know? But there's another layer to it, John, that like Cecil says, one of Cecil's great quotes, so many of them, was, we don't have a life, you do. So let us do all the fantasy football research for you, right? There are moments when you're watching a game. For me, it will always be the Josh Freeman game. Remember that the Vikings traded for Josh Freeman?
Yep.
And somebody didn't want him and somebody traded for him. I don't know. I don't even remember. And they threw poor Josh Freeman out there right away. He was clearly not prepared to play.
Mm-hmm.
It was against the Giants. It was a Monday night game. And it was also the game that John Gruden said, reach around sack. That's a reach around sack. Sorry, Joe. And I was watching that game, and I had this moment, like, what have I done with my life? Like, people will say, I don't have time to play fantasy football this year. I'm sorry. I'm like, no, good for you. You found something better to do with your time than fantasy football. Good for you. But when you find yourself sometimes watching games, like watching, again, it seems like you still have some feelings to get out. We're on the couch about the Monday night doubleheader last night.
I know my game, by the way. When you mentioned your Josh Freeman game, I tell everyone the last time I was happy was the pandemic, whenever the Browns called up Dearness Johnson, not even from the practice squad, from the boat he was fishing on. 3 days later, he reports to Denver. They're on the road. Their whole team is on the COVID list. They're just out. They're down to Case Keenum at quarterback, I believe. So remember, in Denver, and Dearness Johnson out of nowhere, no reps, no training, nothing, goes for over 100 yards and multiple touchdowns, single-handedly wins that game, and then basically is no longer playing football after that. But that game alone, the fact that he just showed up for a team that had Keanu Reeves, that was just all the replacements, and he was the one who dominated it. I Silva watched that game with me, actually, and I'll never forget how happy I was seeing that. Dearness Johnson gave me hope for anything in life. Like when you're watching Chef's Table and you relate it to everything in life, not just the chefs and how they grew to love to cook. Dearness Johnson gave me faith in life that evening. So I remember that Thursday night football game vividly. That was my game.
Yeah, there are those moments of joy. You know, there was a good one from the Jags-Rams game. I think it was Steve Avila. Did you see, like, they drew on 4th and 5, they drew an offsides, and he like did this little jig and did a first down. Like, you don't usually get to see offensive linemen dance and joy. And what's the greatest joy for an offensive lineman? To draw an offsides, right? Like, and it was just that joy from Steve Avila, like, just bled through the screen.
Oh, you know, I should have thought of this, because like the most fun player to watch right now, well, the most fun players in general, like the Cowboys, like the Chiefs, football's just better. Like when you can hate these teams whenever you're just tired of watching them. Like football's better when the Giants are good. And Jaxson Dart and Cam Scatterboo give me so much joy. They had no business. Like the Broncos, the way they've shut down every rushing quarterback they faced, just absolutely dominated them. The Giants had no business ever, like, shutting out a team into the fourth quarter, let alone competing in that game. And so I understand for Giants fan, it was absolute heartbreak to get 3 scores thrown on you in the last 6 minutes in unprecedented fashion. Like, actually the first time that's ever happened in NFL history, to lose that scenario. But there is so much hope there with Jaxson Dart and Cam Scatterboo. And they are so much fun to watch. Scatterboo eats crayons every night, but don't worry about that part.
That's
because he gives so much joy to the sport of football.
Yes.
And that's why everyone loves him. Like Gronk. Like, this is who is. It's not a character.
Marshawn Lynch.
It seems like he's faking it, but this is actually who this guy is. My favorite quote from the entire season so far, among many, as they asked Gunnar Olszewski, the Giants gunner, the special teamer, after that game, they asked him, what does he think of Cam Scatterboo? And his quote was, he's genuinely an idiot, unquote. And that's what the team thinks about him, but they love him because he loves playing football.
That's said with love, just like the Red Sox team that beat the Yankees were the idiots,
Yes.
I mean, that it's an affectionate term, and it's the joy, and like the joy that these guys show, the joyful warriors, Heinz Ward, I've always loved the joyful warriors. They're and that's the joy we should carry to our life. Like, we're all fighting a war too, but let's be joyful. And Jaxson Dart and Cam Scadaboo, I don't know why. I think it's because they play in New Jersey. I just think of Jersey Shore. I'm like, if the Jersey Shore team, but it's the bravado, right? And what's fun about it is Jaxson Dart is transforming that franchise the same way that Jaden Daniels transformed Washington. Like, just his energy. Teams take on the personality of their head coach and quarterback. And Jaxson Dart and what he did in Denver is consequential because it's for real. I mean, like, that he had no business doing that. And you're right that for Giants fans, even though they were distraught at the end of that game, like, look at how much expectations for your team have changed from the beginning of the year to now, when you had a distraught loss because you were up 32 or you were up 26-0. Okay, off the rails. And it's always fun. I guess the first thing I want to ask you, because I know you've done some world traveling, what maybe not next, like actually on the agenda, but where do you want to travel to? Like, what's left on your list of places that you want to
go? Okay, so I know next on my list is my best friend. Well, I feel like I have many best friends, so I can't call her that.
That's perfect.
But one of my best friends in life that I grew up with since kindergarten is the mayor of Banff, Corey DeMano. Anyone can look her up. I still talk to her literally every day, and she just got reelected. Election day was yesterday, Monday, October 20th, for anyone listening. And so my next trip in February is going to go to Banff in the heart of darkness when it's negative 20 degrees out and gets dark at 3 p.m., but go celebrate her since I can't escape during football season. So that's the next trip. Beyond that, though, there is a listener, a avid listener and reader of mine who lives in Chicago and became my very good friend years ago when I was going through my own, therapy sessions and whatnot. Reached out to me, said, "Hey, like, I go to this pub." He's Irish. And he said, "I go to this pub every Friday afternoon if you ever want to come by." And I was like, you know what? I need a friend. I need a hug right now. So I'm going to come by. And since then, for like the last 4 or 5 years, we've been actually really good friends. And it also happens that his dad is a retired Dublin tour guide, since they are actually from the heart of Dublin. And his dad is also an American football fan and has no one to watch it with there. So the idea is to go watch the Super Bowl in Dublin at their home. And then he will also that evening, outside of Irish whiskey, give me like his own tour guide blueprint for me to then just go run off on my own. And so, like, just share the itinerary with me that I need to see the country. So I think that is the next, like, goal, the game plan for me this off season.
That sounds amazing. That's just a beautiful, wonderful thing. Both sides of it coming together, right? Because I mean, there is nothing to it. Again, folks, you come down to New Orleans, I'll give you the insides.
Yes.
Come down to New Orleans, I'll explain it. I love New Orleans so much, and I just want to share that with people. And again, it comes back to that love of life, love of existence, and to go and be like, NFL guy, to watch football with somebody who's never had, that was one of the genesis stories for me. And it's so interesting. One of the things I was thinking about where where that took me was, we are all extensions of the universe reaching out to each other and offering each other gifts, like the universe through people is trying to talk to you, particularly, like, call it God's love, the universe love, whatever. Like, that's how the love it gets there, man. like it's like the old joke about the flood, and it's like, the boat comes, he's like, no, it's good, I pray to God, God's got me covered. And then, like, a helicopter comes and they're like, no, it's good, God's got me covered. And then they're on the roof, and that's one more, like, rescue, God's got me covered. And then they drown and they get to heaven, and God, and they say, what happened, God? And he's like, well, I sent a boat and I sent a helicopter, and people reach out from that place of love place to us. And it's so great that you're like, nah, you know what? Like, yeah, I'm going to go have a beer. What's the cost? And the doing what you're talking about doing in Ireland and sharing that it's just beautiful. Because when I was on the south side of Pittsburgh in 2004, before I was a fantasy analyst, before I worked for football guys, any of that stuff. When it was something I wanted to be a sports talker my whole life. And I went to a bar on the South Side, and there was this Chargers fan, and there was a bunch of games on. It was a Sunday, and it was around the time they had like Kasim Osgood like on the practice squad coming up, or it was the heyday of Antonio Gates, and I was so excited about every team and everybody and everything I had learned, and I was just telling him about the Chargers, and he was like, "My God, I didn't know half of this stuff." He's like, "I'm more excited to watch my team now. Thank you," and I'm like, "Huh, oh." That was a nice experience. And it starts to plant, and you're like, this is good. This is calling out to me. And the universe gives you your plans if you just pay attention, like your insides. So there's that book, DOS Energy, my mom gave me when I played fish for her the first time when I came up from college. She said, "You're a hippie." And the book basically says something like, "You are a perfectly tuned instrument to detect like what's good and not good for you." And that trip sounds like there's a lot of good happening there. I haven't been to Ireland, but it's an amazing, idyllic place, I know. And I mean, I part of me is almost like, why come back, John? Why would you come back?
No, don't do that, because this year, like I remember, so we talked about this off season, the India trip I made with, for the wedding. I was there 3+ weeks, ended it with a week in Sri Lanka at a surfing and yoga resort, which was incredible. But there was a time, because I traveled with a friend there, and usually I travel on my own. I don't travel with friends often, just because it's never worked out like that. But now I'm in a situation where like I have friends that want to travel the world. It's okay, well, that's convenient. That's nice to always share these things with your friends. That's the Rich Rebar way of living, is to always
Oh
share your
yeah.
experiences with people. And we were sitting on the beach in Sri Lanka with like an Indian beer. And I remember like we were talking, and I looked at him and said, like, this is what I have to avoid, because this is what comes natural to me. Like the instinct, the wanderlust to literally just run away,
Yeah.
to call back home and be like, hey, can this, or like pay some kind of like task rabbit worker, can you just move everything out? I'll put it all on Facebook
Right.
marketplace, and I'm just gonna live here instead, and I'm not worried about everything else. Maybe like I'll pay you to ship a box to me, but that's it. Like that to me would be more natural, and it comes easier
Yeah.
than actually staying in place.
Yes.
And so before I went to India, we didn't talk about this. Before I went to India, though, I did have like a board game birthday party. Like all the friends came out, said what I wanted to do, and I said, literally, I just want to play board games. I love playing board games, and I want to do it with my friends and drink with them. That's it. And then they, of course, they asked me, like, what are you looking for at 37? I'll be 38 in 2 months. They said, what are you looking for like at 37? And I was like, the goal was to literally slow down, like to build a home, slow down, and do nothing. And so I can tell you, I've done that this year. But because of that, like I'm going insane, because it is, I have put more work into doing nothing, into like being consistent, than I ever have in my life of running away. And so it was required, it was necessary work, and I have done it successfully. But I am absolutely ready to just wanderlust and get lost again for sure in February.
Oh man, you're speaking to my soul. When I was a little kid, I wanted to either be a trucker or a pilot because I could move around all the time. Fish tour, when I discovered fish tour, which I brought up a couple minutes ago, right there over my head, um, it was like perfect. It was perfect because you just get out in the world, right? I mean, just like I am also like, it would be so easy for me to have just a few things, like just enough stuff to fit in a car or even a backpack. But the nice thing about consistency and being there is that you're being there for people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to be there for people too. Not just be there for ourselves. We have to learn that first. But hey, that little tube that God's love or whatever it is gets in, it has to have self love to keep it unclogged. Self love is that place.
Or in my case, learn it later. Like as we all know, it's never too late to learn something.
Well, right.
So
And Tom Robbins, yeah, and Tom Robbins, rest in peace, said it's never too late to have a happy childhood. So it's never too late. And thank you, folks, for always, again, giving us the opportunity to do this, for giving us your attention and your time, for bringing us into your lives. You are a big part of our lives. We feel you. We love you. We love this journey, even if it means we're watching football at 1 a.m. and wondering what have I done with my life, because folks, you're just so classy.